No one could have predicted the meteoric rise of the Five Nights at Freddy's series, developed by one guy named Scott Cawthorn, who took criticism from previous games and turned it into one more idea. He tried one more game to be successful as a game developer, and it took off. It became a huge part of gaming in a very short amount of time, with fans becoming absolutely rabid for every little detail they could possibly get about the games. A little over a year and a half ago, we didn't have any games in the series, and now we have 5, with the newest one hitting Steam today, Five Nights at Freddy's World, taking away the horror elements from the other Five Nights games and going with a RPG and kind of cute aesthetic to it. However, some people may be growing tired. Is the series growing stale? So is Five Nights at Freddy's World the spark to get things going again? Or is this finally the final nail in the coffin for the Five Nights series? I have to admit, I was very skeptical when I found out that Five Nights at Freddy's was becoming an RPG. Sure, there were the fan games, and some of which have been extremely popular, and I think partly influenced the creation of this particular game. But either way, it's a completely different style of game from the other Five Nights at Freddy's games. You're going from a strictly horror base with one basic camera angle that you're kind of moving around with no real movement to it. Taking that and turning it into an RPG I thought would be quite a task. And I actually was pleasantly surprised with the results when playing Five Nights at Freddy's World. In Five Nights at Freddy's World, you're traveling to a fantasy world, getting away from the horror aesthetics of a pizza parlor haunted house. Instead, you're in a place called Animatronica, or something like that. In fact, the characters don't even know. They call it a few things once you begin the game, which puts the whole thing in kind of perspective, that you're not sure if this is real. It's kind of breaking the fourth wall there, where it's talking about, you know, being a game or being a fantasy world. It knows exactly what it's doing, and it does its storytelling well for the story that is included. You're controlling a team of 8 animatronics at one time, though you're 4 in a party, but you can switch parties to your second set of characters at any moment by just clicking the switch button. So there's a large variety of different types of setups you can have going into battles. Now, defaultly, you have 8 characters unlocked in, well, the one mode, and you have access to 16 in the other mode, and I'll get a little bit into the modes as we go through. I played through the adventure mode, which in it, you start off with 8 animatronics. You can pick what order you would like them in your party and which ones you want in the secondary party or in the first, and as you're traveling through, you randomly unlock new animatronics. Just after completing a random battle, it may say new challenger approaches, and then you battle a new animatronic. When you defeat them, you get them in your party. And surprisingly, there's a large amount of animatronics in the game. In fact, there's 40 of them in order to kind of mix and match your different party members. So there's a good amount of changing you can do. People could play the game multiple times and have completely different parties for each time they end up playing through it. Each of the animatronics has 3 moves at their disposal. As you level up, you don't gain any new moves. Instead, you're just pretty much leveling up your stats, which each level up. However, because of only having 3 moves, it's fun to try to switch up and all the different characters. Every time you get a new character, you want to put them in your party, at least for a battle or two, to kind of try out all their moves. Now, not every character has unique moves, but there is a pretty good amount of moves, and finding the exact characters and the way you want your battle party is actually pretty enjoyable. In fact, up until the final fight, I was still switching in and out all kinds of different party members to kind of figure out what exactly I needed in order to complete the final bosses of the game. Now, to get around in the game, you have your world map, which is the same style of like the Atari 2600 style of graphics we've seen in some of the previous Five Nights games via the mini-games especially, and that's the exact style of graphics you're using here, and you get to explore the world map and travel to 7 different locations. You have a couple of different town-type settings, like a Circus 10, and you have the initial Fazbear town, and then you travel to like a forest, a few different styles of caves, a snow area, a giant river, and then kind of a dark graveyard necropolis style of area. While traveling through, there are, of course, the random battle encounters that you're going to be dealing with. And all the battles in the game are extremely fast-paced. I was actually really surprised how quickly the battles end up going. I mean, attacks and moves and damage and effects are just happening all the time while watching it. It's actually kind of hard to pay exact attention when you first start up of figuring out exactly who's hitting what and for what exact amount of damage. The game never slowed down in battle with all the cool stuff happening, so that's definitely a plus. It's an active time battle system over using a turn-based, so moves will keep happening even if you decide not to select whatever move you're using for your particular character. There's no confirmation when selecting an attack though, so once you click it, it happens. So there was plenty of times where I accidentally, because of the heat of the moment, ended up clicking the wrong move. I may have ended up attacking when I wanted to heal or vice versa. But the entire hecticness of the battles in general reminded me of playing the other Five Nights games. That mouse movement of quickly moving it back and forth between the cameras, closing it, checking out things, and doing various things in order not to be killed in the other Five Nights games is the same kind of feelings. In fact, my hand even started to cramp up after a few hours of playing through Five Nights at Freddy's World from so much mouse movement. Besides the animatronics, they do add new characters because of all the random battles that you end up going through. So there's a good amount of enemy variety considering the few amount of areas that you end up traveling to. So you're going to be seeing a lot of certain types of enemies. And I have to say, I do end up liking the battle system graphics. They may not be anything too amazing. They kind of look like 3D GIFs, to example, because you're seeing them over and over again doing kind of the same motions, but I thought it fit the game well, and I never thought anything looked really out of place. Some of the backgrounds could have used a bit more detail here and there, but overall I thought graphically the game looked pretty good. Especially considering I was thinking the game was going to be more in line with like an RPG Maker style of game, so I was pleasantly surprised when I ended up seeing the battle system in action. Now, to help you out in the battles, there's no individual equipment, like you're not equipping weapons or armor individually to the characters, but you can upgrade your defense in the game. There's also two other elements that really help you out. They're chips and bites. When you find chips and you find them in various locations on the map and treasure chest and the like, they do something random. They may be an attack boost or a defense boost, or they may give you an instant resurrect spell immediately once you end up dying. There's a couple of different styles of chips in the game, so finding them all will definitely benefit you. You can have 4 chips equipped at all times, so you have to pick and choose which ones you think are going to be best, and you may want to change up depending upon the current situation that you're in. Now for the bites, you can also have 4, and the bites are basically these companions that you don't control, but are in your battles, and they're constantly doing different things. You may have one that's floating overhead that heals you every so often, or one that does deadly attacks. You mix and match which ones you end up finding the best. There is a total of 21 bites to collect in the game, and you end up buying these from random shops that are all over the place on the maps of the game. While there is 21, it's basically 7 different types, and each type has 3 variants. So you'll have like the weak version, the kind of normal middle version, and then the superior best version of a particular bite. But using them and picking the right ones and buying the right ones will definitely help you and sometimes hinder you depending upon what kind of battle you're in. One thing I was actually really pleasantly surprised by was the soundtrack. It's actually pretty good, with some great tunes that play not only on the world map, but in certain battles. In fact, I hope they actually release the soundtrack separately so I can get a hold of it, because it's actually a really good listen, and one of the better aspects of the game for sure. The game has a few different styles of play to it. You have the normal and hard difficulties, with the hard difficulty unlocking a different ending once you end up completing it, and I'm sure there's plenty of secrets and mini-games that you end up finding throughout. You have to find clocks in order to unlock mini-games and get the true ending of the game. I'm sure very similar to Five Nights at Freddy's 4 in the way that it ended up unlocking a special ending if you were able to find all of the mini-games. There's also 2 modes to the game. You have the Adventure mode, which allows you to pick from the original kind of 8 animatronics at the beginning, but you discover the other animatronics randomly. The new challenger approaches is only in the Adventure mode. In the other mode, it's more restrictive. You only have 16 of the animatronics to choose from, and once you pick your party, that's your party for the entire length of the game. And I'm not sure if that ends up unlocking a separate ending or different various things, since I only have played through the Adventure mode so far, but I'm sure there's probably something special for doing both of the different styles of play. One thing I think a lot of gamers may be disappointed with is the fact that the game is relatively short. When you think RPG, you're thinking of these really long, epic experiences because of games like Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest, and the like. However, this is a relatively short game. It's about 3.5 to 4 hours it took me to get through it on my initial playthrough. Of course, times are going to vary depending upon how much you grind for money, and there's a decent amount of money grinding that I ended up doing because I was trying to buy some more bites and level up my defense by buying the better defensive items, though I never quite built up enough money to buy that final defensive item, which I'm sure would have made things really easy overall. If you're looking for a really in-depth RPG, you're gonna have to look elsewhere. This is a much more simple but fun and fast-paced RPG. Like I said, the frantic battles really did remind me of just playing the other Five Nights at Freddy's games, so it felt right at home alongside those. So if you're expecting a lot of real strategy when it comes to like turn-based gameplay or stat grinding or level building, you're not going to end up finding it with Five Nights at Freddy's World. However, if you're looking for a more casual, easy to start playing RPG where it doesn't take too long to kind of figure out how things work, you're definitely going to have a lot of fun with the game. I think fans that aren't even fans of the Five Nights at Freddy's lore, or maybe ones that were just honestly too scared to play some of the other Five Nights games, may be able to pick up FNAF World and actually have some fun with it. I'm sure there are some horror elements, maybe some jump scares that I ended up not finding in my initial playthrough. I know of some stuff I've heard, but since the game just came out, I don't know every little detail about the game yet, so I can't promise that there's no jump scares. Though there is a warning for flashing lights, just like a lot of the previous games, so if you have an issue with like epilepsy with some flashing lights, you may have some difficulty playing through the game. Coming from someone who fully admits I'm not the biggest Five Nights at Freddy's fan, I have played through the Five Nights at Freddy's games, and I've had enjoyment. Five Nights 2 is definitely my favorite amongst the series, but I'm not into the lore as much as a lot of people. But I think it's really cool what people have done, the videos based on the lore of the series and all the different fan theories that have come up amongst it. It's really cool and definitely reminds me of my younger days in high school when the Silent Hill games were coming out, and I was playing through them with other people, and we were trying to nitpick every little tiny detail of the game and figuring out exactly what did everything mean. So I really like the Five Nights at Freddy's games for that reason, and I think it's really cool that it has such a rabid and passionate fan base. I also have to admit that I really did enjoy Five Nights at Freddy's World. It was better than what I expected. I had no expectation going in, so I'm sure some people are going to be disappointed because they're expecting the biggest, hugest game ever, and it isn't. But for me, I enjoyed it. It was some fun, fast-paced combat, and there was definitely some strategy that came in. It wasn't a pushover. There are some difficult boss fights, and I was only able to get past them once I figured out the right moves to do at the right time. Overall, I loved my experience, and I'm definitely giving Five Nights at Freddy's World a 7 out of 10. It is a fun, fast-paced RPG that I think just about any gamer can at least mess around with and enjoy for a little bit of time. But that will wrap up my review of Five Nights at Freddy's World. I'd like to thank you for watching, and of course, I hope you enjoyed.